In the next 45 minutes, our expert panel will be discussing some of the great policy challenges here in the Gulf region and how behavioral science can help address them all together. Our panel will also discuss how interventions more generally should be tailored to the region based on their own experiences. To lead this discussion, I am pleased to welcome Dr. Mohammed Almazrouei. Dr. Mohammed is a member of Abu Dhabi Government's Behavioral Insight Network, a platform for policymakers to connect, collaborate, and share knowledge in the application of behavioral science in Abu Dhabi. Joining him on this panel, we also have Her Excellency Khuloud Nuwais, who is the Chief Strategy and Sustainability Officer at the Emirates Foundation, a foundation founded in the by the UAE government to facilitate public-private funded initiatives across the UAE. Her Excellency was an early pioneer in the application of behavioral science to the issues of food waste in the country. Dr. Munther Al-Bousaidi is the Vice Chairman of Oman Vision 2040 Implementation Follow-up Unit. The unit is tasked with supporting the implementation of the Vision's programs and initiatives, including with the application of behavioral science tailored to the Omani context. We also have May bin Baz, who is the director of the Decision Support Center, DSC, in Saudi Arabia. DSC uses behavioral science to enhance the effectiveness and efficiencies of decision-making processes across various governmental domains, ensuring timely and informed outcomes. We also have Zeina Afif, who is a senior behavioral science at the World Bank Mind, Behavior and Development Unit. She focuses on leveraging behavioral insights across a range of challenges, including enhancing women's financial inclusion and employment, tackling youth unemployment, and improving public services access, including in the Gulf region. مرحبا بكم جميعا، حياكم الله.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Thank you for joining this afternoon session. Over the past 1.5 days here at the Behavioral Exchange, we heard very insightful talks on how behavioral science is already being applied in the region. That is the GCC region, and even more broadly, the Middle East. For example, these include specific and important challenges that addresses different sectors, such as yesterday, I remember an interesting talk on inappropriate use of antibiotics that can lead to antimicrobial resistance. Also, there were interesting talks about reducing sludges or having governments to have better government services, such as TAM in Abu Dhabi, to have one centralized platform for all the government services. In this session, we will dig deeper in the context of the Middle East and GCC. We aim in this session to address questions such as what are the specific policy challenges in the region which lend themselves to a behavioral science lens? How do these differ from policy challenges in contexts where behavioral science has a more mature basis? And how should interventions and broader approaches be tailored to the region? These will be the central questions for the panel. Speakers will be invited to share their experiences of applying behavioral science in the region, and interestingly, also what has surprised them. The panel will conclude by touching on future avenues of collaboration between behavioral science units in the region. Following this session, we will ask audience members to vote on a short list of potential priorities for behavioral science in the region over the coming 5 years. So I want to start with the broader picture with Dr. Munther and May. How is behavioral science currently contributing to Oman Vision 2040 and to Saudi Arabia Vision 2030?
Sure. That's a very good question, I think, to start up with the panel discussion. And from our perspective, I'm the vice chairman for Vision 2040, which is basically a unit responsible for making sure that the vision being implemented. And the vision serves as like a kind of like a roadmap, but at the same time, it also provides the policy areas that need to be focused on. For example, the vision that we have is basically divided into 12 priorities. And some of them, for example, focus on research, some of them focus on welfare, some of them focuses also on citizenship, for example. And others also focus on the economic side and the environmental side. So these pillars kind of serves as a guideline of what are the potential policy areas that need to be focused on. When you talk about behavioral science, of course, in Oman, and I was reflecting on this yesterday as well, the idea of having a vision is also, it includes an element of behavioral science. You're trying to motivate people to focus on one direction. By talking about it, uniting them on just one goal is also an element of behavioral science. In terms of applications that we encountered in Oman, there are many applications, and I'll just probably touch on one or two examples right now, and I'm sure the rest of the panel have many things to share. One of the things we have is basically focusing on specific challenges that are facing in the current phase. One of them was basically participation in voting. We have councils, like shura councils, or basically councils that represent certain districts, and they're responsible for channeling the voices of citizens to the government. And one of the challenges we had over the past couple of years is like, actually participating in voting itself. It was a bit probably not encouraging to go in this hot weather and go to the ballot boxes and just vote. So we thought of an alternative solution, which is basically automating the whole process. In doing so, we design an application that is basically make sure that the whole process just can be done from home. You can basically vote, and there's a verification process that kind of scans your face and matches to the ID card that you have. And this kind of increased the participation rate in voting overall in Oman. Of course, this application also serves as a wealth of information. There's lots of information in terms of demographics, how people interacted with the app, for example. And this can be beneficial for the future in designing future interventions that make sure that also participation can be increased further. One of the challenges we faced in this level as well was like, even we automated the whole process, there were still people who did not vote, who did not actually update their profile basically for voting. So we used a simple nudge, which is a simple reminder approach, sending them reminders about updating, and it worked. For the targeted population, there was like a 50% increase, which is something that is probably welcomed by at the national level. Other examples that probably displayed also in the exhibition out there, which is the Social Protection Fund. Recently, we upgraded the social protection probably system for Oman overall. And one of the challenges is like trying to make sure that people are acquainted or find the whole process easy. They're trying to understand like what is the best way to make sure that people get enrolled in this system. So there was a project that is still ongoing, and kindly it was done with a consulting company that is basically handling the whole project. Magenta, if I'm not mistaken, there's someone here in the audience. And the project is divided into multiple phases. And the first phase that we focused on was basically building capacity. It was very important to equip people with the right knowledge and skills to understand how to apply behavioral science to social protection fund issues. The second phase was like, it's a part of a change management process. It was very important to build up kind of messengers that kind of send the same message about behavioral science to the rest of government, also to the same social protection fund. And that's so now there's a program which is basically TOT, train the trainer. And now these trainers will be basically the messages that sends the idea of behavioral science to the rest of government as well. The third phase that is still ongoing, which is basically to understand the perception of people, how people perceive the whole welfare system in Oman. What challenges, what are the concerns? What is the thing that is keeping them up at night? And the reason for this is just to understand more or dig deep into the context of how people behave or interact with the system. And the idea, after we understand this, there'll be a designated solution for each one. And this should probably enable the system to work better by using behavioral science. And the last example, and I'll stop talking, so I'll leave the rest for the panel as well, which is basically a simple tax system. With the introduction of VAT, it was very important for the corporate sector as well, to file their taxes. And currently, we have a reminder system in place where basically you have to be reminder for all the corporate companies that when they have to file their VAT, and also for the end of year, basically, disclosure. Of course, there also talks about the personal income tax, but probably that's a different avenue as well.
I think they're very interesting and different areas where behavioral science has been applied. And clearly for the example of voting, it's a very clear example of reducing the sludge so that people can participate more frequently and better. How about in Saudi Arabia?
First of all, Mohammed, thank you so much for bringing BX and for the whole BX team to be here in the Middle East. I remember the last BX exchange or behavioral exchange I attended was in London 2019, and I was so in awe of the cutting edge research and the amount of activity in the field. So and I remember specifically going back to my team at the time and saying, oh my God, we're barely scratching the surface. We have to do so much. So 5 years from that time, I hope we have enough evidence to present in Saudi, not just at DSC level or where I work, but the entire ecosystem in Saudi is invested in behavioral science. So in terms of the vision, so the Saudi context is replete with examples where behavioral science could be applied. But I could say that Vision 2030 is like a blueprint. So it gave us like the guideline of where to look and where we think behavioral science should be applied. So it gave us the targets that we want to reach when it comes, for example, the saving rates that we have. We want households to have this 10% saving rate of their income. We have the uptake of investment product that we need actually individuals to have more investments in their portfolios rather than just keeping their money without investment and not thinking about the long-term future. We have an unemployment rate that we want to target, which, by the way, according to the latest report of Vision 2030 results, we reached the target unemployment rate, which is 7% out of 13% when the vision first started. But we also have a lot to do in that sense, because we still have to work on women unemployment. It's still higher than men employment. So all these areas are actually ready policy areas where behavioral science can be applied. And in that sense, we have the willingness of the policymakers to invest in behavioral science. So in Saudi, we have 9 units working in behavioral science, each specialized in their own area. So we have the DSC, where the Decision Support Center is like a multi-sectorial looking at different policy topics, because we're essentially a policy advisor and advisory arm for the government. But we also have in the labor market 2 entities specifically focusing on the interventions and the behavioral science aspect of the labor market. We have something in the tax authority as well, tax and zakat authority, a behavioral unit is there as well. So you can see that wherever the vision tells us there are policies that we should be applying behavioral science, there is a unit. And the beauty of this ecosystem is that we're all collaborative. So we have our own knowledge exchange meetings, we have knowledge sharing, where we talk about the research that we do individually. Yes, it's not all published, but yet we are learning from each other, which is very crucial. And I think it's still the next step for us to increase the publication and increase the work that we are doing when it comes to sharing applications of behavioral science. So I might as well just share some examples of the work that we do, and conscious of time, so I'll focus on two areas we worked on. One was on misinformation. So we know the prevalence of misinformation prior to COVID, after COVID, it's still prevalent. So we try to do something about this, and we focus on health misinformation. So we did simulate this experiment where we presented participants with different news. Some of them are true, some of them are false, and we presented them with different treatments. So there's a control, and there's the other treatment was on what if this health news is being refuted in the answer by an expert from the Ministry of Health. That's one treatment. The other would be what if it is refuted by an expert in the field, like a doctor replying this piece of news is not true. So how would people react? Would they believe it? Is there an uptake of understanding that this is false news or not? And we also have an AI fact check treatment, where we show that this is a piece of false news, and the AI would check if and would actually refute this false news. So compared to the control, we discovered that AI fact-checking and refuting false news is not going to work or is not working. So, but AI in distributing true news is actually working. So people would rather believe a Minister of Health expert or someone representative from the Minister of Health to refute false news in the answer, so they'd rather hear from him, as well as a doctor or a specialist in the field. And this reminds me of the session we had yesterday over how chatbots and GPT versus human answer, which means that we still, yes, we love technology, we love to be applying chatbots and all of these to streamline and have more efficient, but still there is, behavioral science tells us that human interaction is still needed right now. So this is something that was really eye-opening, and it's actually worthy, and it has a policy implication. So you have to still look into how would the human interaction look like. The other would be on energy efficiency. So there is a huge and a lot of initiatives from Saudi Arabia on energy inefficiency and sustainability. We have a whole center called the Saudi Energy Efficiency Center, and some of their initiatives are actually subsidizing people to change an old appliance, an old AC, so that they would have an A-rated, for example, AC, and it would be more energy efficient. They do a lot of campaigns and awareness, yet we need to complement also and understand how behavioral science can be applied. So we've done in experiments also a simulation of an online shop that would encourage people to select an energy efficient appliance. And that's after going through 120 different energy saving behaviors. But we picked one where we could actually observe and measure, and this is how would we influence people to purchase an energy efficient appliance from a store, from an online store. And we had 3 treatments there. So we show the label that we already have in the Saudi standards. It's an A-rated or a B-rated or a C-rated energy appliance. So we want to encourage and nudge people for the A-rated. We know it's probably a bit expensive, but what we have done in one of the treatments is that we have shown the cost saved in the long run by buying this energy efficient appliance. So instead of you spending on a lower cost B-rated appliance or a wash machine or whatever you're buying, invest in an A-rated with a higher price, but this is what you're going to save. And this showed about 68% improvement compared to the control. We also added a treatment where we put a trusted messenger, what we call a trusted messenger. So we said the Saudi Energy Efficient Center encourages people or recommends this piece of wash machine. So if you want to buy it, this is something encouraged. This also showed significant result with 55% compared to control. And we also did something called a timely swap. So once you go to the cart where it's going to be your last point before checking out, the system or the shop suggests a more energy efficient appliance with the same cost that you are putting or purchasing this appliance that you have chose. So would people actually at the last stage pick that over the one that they have originally chosen? Yes, but it showed only a 38% improvement. So it means that we have a lot of insights to uncover, and we have the willingness of policymaker, eagerness of people to work in this area. So I think we have a good recipe for success in behavioral science.
That's very interesting. Thank you, May. It's very enlightening to hear that there are 9 units in Saudi Arabia and that you already work together. I think we need to come back to this later on in terms of opportunities for collaboration.
Of course.
And the example you mentioned about energy efficiency, it reminds me of projects here, even in the UAE, that are being conducted. Maybe that would be another opportunities to learn from each other and share data potentially. So I want to move to Your Excellency Khuloud. A policy challenge for which a behavioral science approach has been particularly effective is food waste. Please tell us about some of the successes of NAMA, which is the National Food Loss and Waste Initiative here in the UAE.
Thank you. Delighted to be here, and congratulations to the behavioral science team for the success of this event. It's been an amazing 2 days. And I'm delighted to be here this morning to share actually some of the work that we have done with BIT and BSG to change some of the behaviors that are leading to food waste. For those of you who don't know NAMA is the National Food Loss and Waste Initiative that was launched to translate the vision of His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, the UAE President, and to encourage really social responsibility and promote sustainable practices across the food supply chain. Our target is to reduce food waste by 50% by the year 2030. This is something that we cannot deliver in isolation, but rather requires a lot of collaboration and partnership. NAMA has about 5 strategic key pillars. One of them is really to build the data and evidence and be able to measure actual food loss and waste. And only then we can create the right interventions to basically address food loss and waste. The second strategic pillar is raising awareness coupled with behavioral change. And this is where really we have done a number of successful projects and pilot to try and build data and evidence that will allow us to measure actual reduction in food loss and food waste. I would like to share perhaps the size of the problem also, because sometimes it's important to put the size of the problem into perspective, and it gives a clearer picture. I mean, food waste is not just a local problem, but it's a global problem. What a lot of people don't know is how it's linked to climate change and the impact that it has. So almost 8 to 10% of the greenhouse gases comes from food waste. If we think of food waste as a country, it would be probably the 3rd largest greenhouse gas emitter. And therefore, this is why it requires collective action. NAMA has really worked on piloting key initiatives with strategic partners from the hospitality sector. What we have done is we've worked with initially Jumeirah hotels, for example, to introduce simple, small nudges that has helped us really effectively reduce food waste, whether in commercial settings or in staff canteens. But what we simply introduced was a lot of messages that was placed on buffets, and I'm sure many of you know that the UAE is a very hospitable culture, and there is many buffets which unfortunately tend to go to waste sometimes, and this is where our interventions has really helped reduce this waste. We introduce simple nudges like the messaging, portion size control, and I'm sure you have seen, many of you, the portion sizes outside in the buffet. Also, we have introduced the way food is being scooped in these buffets sometimes by the supporting staff in hotels, where we have placed what an ideal portion looks like. And if you want back more, you can come back and take more. These messages, coupled with the portion sizes, has really helped in reducing food waste. But we've also introduced other interesting tools, such as measurement tools, which has really helped us to effectively measure food waste. And the final nudge was very interesting, and this was tested specifically in staff canteens, where we replaced black garbage bags with transparent ones. And this has helped also increase the level of awareness of employees when they're scraping off food from their plates. So the combination of applying these nudges has effectively allowed us to reduce food waste by 44%. And we've done also another trial with Hilton hotels, where this was done throughout their green breakfast, where across their 13 hotels, specifically across the breakfast, they have replaced the bread basket, which is the #1 item that tends to go to waste, with bringing your selection of a specific type of bread being served hot to you. And this has contributed to a reduction in food waste by almost 62%. So these applied experiences where we've applied behavioral science nudges to test and experiment how they effectively contribute to the reduction in food waste has really allowed us to work with different partners to work on the scale up of these experiences as well. And now this is something that we are heavily focused on doing, not just in one sector, which is the hospitality sector, but we will be working also across other sectors, such as the retail sector, for example. We're right now conducting the first UAE baseline study to measure actual food loss and waste at also the household level. The outcome of the study will be to have indices that will allow us to report on the UAE's food waste per capita. It will allow us to identify where across the food supply chain are the hotspots of where food loss and food waste occurs the most, and it will help us to design better interventions with the right nudges as well. The other two pillars are focused on really collaboration, which sits at the heart of what Naama does, because without collaboration and partnerships with everyone across the food supply chain, we cannot multiply our impact. And the fourth pillar is really looking at policy and how can we transform some of these behavioral science experiences by creating new policies that allow us to create a more enabling environment in the space to reduce food waste. But also the final pillar is a very important one, and that is really focusing on innovation and technology. And in Naama, we are able to do that through investing in a collaboration that we have with Tamkeen, which is the food tech competition, which gives us access to startups, not only globally, but also local startups that have solutions that address food loss and waste. And we try to work with these solutions and we bring them into the ecosystem to help us create more efficiencies in reducing food loss and waste.
Very interesting. Actually, when I saw the food there, like with the small portions, I thought there was some sort of behavioral nudge there.
Yes. Now people refer to me. I mean, at the last World Government Summit, I met some colleagues and they were like, when we saw the portion sizes, we realized Khuloud was here. So
Yeah. I think you touch on my follow-up question, but feel free if you want to add anything. How do you feel you want to maximize the impact of Naama, and what are the challenges in that area? If you wanted to add anything further.
I think initially the challenges were, one, there wasn't enough data about food waste, and the information is scattered. The second challenge was really getting everyone across the supply chain, all the sectors, all the right government entities to work together. So aligning everyone and creating unification around the cause to work together collectively, to work to unify the methodology of measuring. And I believe we've come a very long way, and this is why now we've created a unified approach for the first UAE baseline that we're currently conducting. And thanks to a lot of the corporates and the sectors that have been really supporting our work. But also, I feel there's a lot more that still needs to be done. And that is really multiplying our impact and finding ways and creative solutions to scale up some of the work that we have done. And we've managed to do that by creating guidelines to show and business cases to show how effective some of the projects and the pilots that we have done. And we've created some guidelines and call to action to the industry and the hospitality sector to work with us on scaling up the impact of applying some of the behavioral nudges that I've highlighted, which has been very effective. And this is why we're seeing the impact being multiplied. A lot of our partners are working with us to create zero food waste events, like the event we are in today, which is another framework that has proved our success around making sure that edible food is being rescued and redirected to those who need it the most, but also the unedible food is being composited and turned into other usable products such as fertilizer, and hence the rediversion of food waste from reaching landfill. But also, the next venture for us is going to be looking at policies and how do we bring all these lessons learned and key successes to create policies and regulations that allow us to scale up across the UAE and transform some of the behaviors and habits so that we are able to sustain the impact that we have created so far. I think one area is very clear to us is really making it mandatory to measure and report on food waste by the different sectors. But also this will help us at the individual level get people to really commit to changing some of their practices. I think Ramadan, there was a lot of lessons learned. We have a lot of socializing events and gatherings where a lot of the food tends to go to waste. And we have also developed guidelines there for people on what actions they should take to contribute as individuals to food waste reduction.
Yeah.
And hopefully this will allow us to reach a new norm where by 2030 we are able to reach our reduction targets.
Inshallah, inshallah. And you really touch on an interesting perspective where behavioral science alone is not enough. We need hard policies and behavioral science side by side. I'll come back maybe if we have time to more challenges in other regions, but I want to zoom out a little bit. My next question is to Zeina. What do you feel are the opportunities for collaboration between countries to grow behavioral science in the region?
First, thank you so much for having us and congratulations on a very successful BX. We all seem very eager and happy to be back together as a community. There are a number of opportunities to collaborate, and this is obviously an important one that's demonstrating why we need to collaborate and share. There's great work happening already in the region that, maybe there's not enough time to get things published, disseminated, but there's great research already taking place and behavioral work, whether it is to looking into issues such as strengthening human capital. So we're talking about improving health behaviors. There's work being done on how do you kind of build this preventive healthcare mindset. A lot of people in the region tend to rely mostly on going to the doctor when there's a problem. Well, how do you basically increase routine visits, screening? These are very important for longevity and reducing risk diseases. So this is, for example, an area where there's already work happening in the region that I think sharing it among other countries and other entities will be very beneficial. Other areas, such as with the labor market, there's the challenges that the region is facing, with the youth, with reliance on public sector jobs, with increasing female labor force participation. This is also another area that, as a region, there are challenges being faced, and the cultures are very similar. So how do you work together to better understand the social norms and the shared norms as well that can be potentially, as a region, shifted to be able to support things such as increasing women's empowerment. So there are a number of opportunities to work together, and I think the first one is to be able to convene together and share and exchange these, whether it's bilateral or as a region. And finally, going back on society behaviors or around Ramadan, whether it's for reducing food waste. Everybody's watching Netflix and soap operas and shows during Ramadan, and that's a great tool to use to be able to also help demonstrate what are some of the norms that we want to encourage, whether it is what does the sufra looks like when you are having people over for dinner. Do you have a lot of food? Do you have less food? So even being able to partner together on edutainment and create content that promotes the kind of shared norms that, as a region, that we would like to promote.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I guess to follow up on this, like if you can give some specific example or ideas on how might not just governments, but also academic institutions and foundation can work together in a more coherent ecosystem.
So we're seeing some of that. This is a great example. You brought together foundations, you brought together international organizations, you brought government, academia. What I love about behavioral science, it naturally brings those parties together, which you don't see in other necessarily sectors or public policy areas. Behavioral science from the start was bringing together academia and public policy together, and now also the international organizations, foundations, are part of that, because we all want the same thing. We want to improve public policy, we want to improve, make it more efficient, effective, and we want to be able to serve better our citizens. So the nice thing is that there's already a goal, a shared goal among all of these entities, and I think having these platforms, these collaboration opportunities, and potentially to pilot things together, not just only knowledge sharing, but also piloting together and having research programs together, can also help build this further.
Very interesting. Either May or Zeina, whoever want to answer this question, how can behavioral science be used to support engagement, inclusion, and integration in countries with large expats, like here in the GCC? Do you feel like...
Yesterday, and I saw it in one of the sessions when they were talking about strengthening communities. It's actually not just, there's not a simple solution to break those walls between those communities, but we could start from the shared spaces where all of these communities meet together. So for example, in our case in Saudi, masajid or mosques are the place where everybody is working from all walks of life, and they come and they mingle together. So that's a place where we see the poor, the rich, the worker, the blue collar and the white collar, everybody's there. So these are prime places. Also the workplace are where communities get together. And I guess we're probably spending a lot in Saudi on cultural activities, knowing more about the Saudi culture, our heritage. There's a lot of emphasis and effort and programs, initiatives on that. And this would actually get communities together, either those who are intending to come and work and stay in Saudi for a while, or those who are already there, who are not in touch with the Saudi society. They would also be encouraged to know more. So there's not a simple solution or a nudge, or there's a complete portfolio of interventions and things that we need to do to actually bring all those and strengthen the communities that are already living here in one space. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. I guess I want to try to focus on the last part is about the opportunities, and
Yes.
sometimes like opportunities and challenges come hand in hand. What do you feel, Dr. Munther, about opportunities in terms of behavioral science in the region? What can we do more of, in your view?
Sure. There are many opportunities, and probably I'll highlight some of them. The first one that comes to mind is basically health. If I recall the statistic correctly, I think 40% of premature death was basically due to behavior. So there's lots going to be done on that front. We live in a world where basically having bad food is becoming much, much easier. So through ordering apps, you can have a burger today and tomorrow and the day after. So focusing on this aspect, which is basically health, is very critical at this stage because if not handled properly, that will put a strain on your health system as well. And there are many opportunities for behavioral science on that in terms of the prevention side, or basically, things like taking your medication and so on. The other element or policy area that is probably important is consumption overall. And when I talk about consumption, there are mainly three areas. There's consumption of electricity and water, with lifting of subsidies in some of the Gulf countries as well. People are still taking time to get used to the new system and monitoring how they use their water and electricity. The other part of consumption, which is basically food, Her Excellency touched on that as well. And we were talking about before the session, food waste is not only in Ramadan, it's across the year. This is part of our culture. It's like you want to be as generous as much as you can, and that has its own issues. And the last part of consumption, which is consumption of unnecessary goods, like things that you don't need, that affects your, let's say, bottom line at the end of the day. And it's very kind of ironic sometimes. You talk to families that are probably under stress, and when you look at their lifestyle, it doesn't show that they're aware of that, for example. You see them buying iPhones and the rest of other kind of luxury products. So consumption is basically, with the vision of these three areas, are critical. And the last area that I can think of is basically environmental behavior. The infrastructure is there for recycling, for example, but getting people to get excited and kind of motivated to indulge or involve in environmental behavior is also a challenge. And these are the top three areas that probably are critical for the next phase.
So I guess the opportunity here is really to know what are the priorities for behavioral science, which will be the question for the audience at the end. I'm gonna ask this last question to Your Excellency Khuloud. The same question, like what do you feel are the opportunities that we need to consider so we can develop behavioral approaches that are context specific to the region, and then we're gonna move to the voting part.
I think, thank you, Doctor. You've highlighted key ones around not only addressing food waste, but on the recycling aspect of things and getting people to actually make these small shifts in their day-to-day lives to change some of the habits that are either contributing to food waste or even one of the new initiatives that we're working on now is textile circularity, making sure that we are more sustainable in the way we live. Reducing the consumption of plastics is another one. So really, we need to integrate some of these practices very early on in the education system. We need to make sure that our youngsters are much more aware of the importance of living sustainably, and making sure we integrate that into the education system. And we continue also to build the level of awareness. We've been doing that through Ni'ma as well, through our awareness campaigns throughout the year, where we make sure also your previous point around being inclusive and addressing the diverse population in the UAE. We have more than 200 nationalities, so everyone has to be part of this journey because we all add value at the end of the day to contributing to living sustainably.
Thank you. And I would like to thank all the panelists for sharing their important and valuable views. There are a lot of opportunities for this region, and this platform is a great step forward towards it. I heard, I mean, in this session we talked about behavioral science in the context of the GCC and the Middle East, some of the real-world examples, some of the challenges and opportunities. What I read, like in broader lines, the keywords about collaboration. There's not enough data in this region, so maybe we need to share data. I heard about prioritizing some sectors over others. So I want to hear the view of the audience. There should be some sort of a voting screen, if there is. I was told that there would be. Okay, so if you could please scan this barcode and let us know what are your thoughts and on what would be the priority for behavioral science in the region in the next 5 years. I want to see. And I hope there is an area where we can add more of them, because I think behavioral science can also be applied in other sectors like law, security, and safety. So let's see. We're seeing like around
Race going on.
It's like a race. I feel like health and well-being is getting ahead.
Yeah.
And others are equivalent, approximately. Okay, we heard your voices, and I was wishing that there was another area where we could add like safety and security, but it's okay.
There's maybe one more area, maybe, Mohammed, we need to add here.
Yeah, they should have. Anyways, thank you so much, everyone, for staying back.
Thank you.
And for I hope you learned something on this session.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We are all very proud and excited to hear all the momentum and potential for the region in the UAE and the region. Now, these were very interesting results, and I'd like to thank you all for voting and for attending. We'll be back here again in the Red Theatre at 2:30 p.m. for a session on how individual action for the climate can drive meaningful change at scale. In the meantime, we invite you to join us for a quick bite and some lunch and explore our BI gallery and the calibration corner, both of which will be at the Blue Theatre entrance. Thank you.